every parade at that time had a ball in the municipal auditorium. A lot of parades would have them on the night of the actual parade, but there were many parades that would have them some weeks beforehand. And he did King Kong, and inside of the municipal auditorium, which held several thousand people, and it's a mezzanine, 2 stories tall, and he's built this 3-story tall bamboo wall inside of the auditorium, and with these giant gates. And he's got this, beautiful blonde girl tied to the stake, and he has all the guys in the crew, the 200 members of the crew, dressed up as natives. He's got a young guy, he's got this guy who's the great white hunter with with this gun, and he's got everything all set up. And all of a sudden, you hear this, you hear Kong on the other side of the wall. You hear branches cracking, and he's going through the brush, and you're hearing this rumble and this noise, and stuff is breaking. And all of a sudden, the door, these giant gates that he's built, 3-story tall bamboo gates, are moving, and all of the guys that are the natives run up, and they're trying to hold the doors back. Well, all of a sudden, the doors burst open, and in comes this 3-story tall King Kong with 6 of my father's friends inside of it. And smoke's coming out of the nostrils, and the eyes are lit up, and its head is animated, and the eyes open and close, and it basically walks in, and literally people are running for the exits. I mean, it was such a theatrical thing.
We would like to thank our title sponsor, B1 Bank. B1 Bank knows that entrepreneurs like you are always thinking one step ahead. So you need banking solutions that can keep up. It begins with lending. Does your business need working capital or financing for new equipment? How about a real estate or a construction loan? Good news, the B1 lending team is ready to learn your goals and help you find the best lending option available. Now let's talk about uncomplicating your daily cash flow. B1 offers a full array of treasury management services that let you collect funds faster, pay funds more efficiently, and access your information with powerful online tools. Most importantly, B1 understands the value of working with local nonprofits to build a stronger community. They believe in giving back through hands-on involvement with their B1 Community Outreach Program because it's simply the right thing to do. B1 Bank. Be uncomplicated. To learn more, visit b1bank.com. Equal housing lender, member FDIC. Hello, I'm Andrew McClendon, your host of the Next Entrepreneur Podcast. We're here today at Mardi Gras World, and our guest today is Mr. Barry Kern, President and CEO of Kern Studios and Mardi Gras World. So, Barry, thank you for hosting us here and having joined us on the podcast.
I'm glad to have you guys.
So I was here just like 10 days ago for the first time. B1 Bank did a conference in New Orleans, and we went around to visit some of our customers, and I was just fascinated. But when you took us on a tour and started telling stories, I was the guy with the biggest smile because I knew I was going to interview you in a week or so. I was like, the best thing I can do is turn on the mic and let Barry tell stories because they were exhilarating.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's this is a very unique business and a very unique city. Yeah. And obviously, the legacy of this family business, now with my sons, the 4th generation, starting off from the very beginning, my grandfather building a float on the back of a garbage wagon.
Yeah.
1932.
It's so rich, and I love doing the research on your family and the legacy. But you had made the point that yours is a very unique business, right?
Well, I mean, first of all, historically, we're in an industry that, frankly, was very, very, it was part of the city, always was part of the city, but has seen dramatic changes from the times, just frankly, when my father incorporated the business, because my grandfather did the first float on the back of a garbage wagon in 1932, and that was really the beginning of our family, being involved in this. He was an artist, and you couldn't make money during the Depression being an artist. He was a sign writer on the ships and freighters and tugboats and barges in the Mississippi River. And then, of course, my father gets out of World War II. This is, we're talking about the late 1940s, and gets into this business. And, he first builds the Alla Parade, which was a small crew in the West Bank, but then he got the Rex Parade that happened to be, run by Darwin Finner, who was the grandson of a cotton broker who started a small stock brokerage firm, Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Finner, and Bean. So Mr. Finner, kind of basically brought my dad to the bank was a mentor of my dad and brought him to the bank, to the Whitney Bank, and, taught him how to write checks and basically, opened up bank accounts for him. And basically, that was the beginning. So
right.
He didn't really have a great background. Also, you got to remember at that time, Mardi Gras was a small industry. And, and he was an artist. So, all of those things, when you have an artist who is really, a very charismatic, imaginative guy, the business as it is wonderful and it's really intriguing. But sometimes, it's more hype than it is business.
Yeah, I mean, and it's tough in the fact that it's seasonal.
Right. Of course, yeah, it's a seasonal business. It only happens, for those couple of weeks, but it's a year round. And basically what happened is in the course of our business history, it really became a business. And then as we started going to other cities and frankly, visiting and doing business for Universal and Disney and, all the theme parks around the country, but also around the world. And as Mardi Gras got bigger, and expanded. And frankly, it went hand in hand because as Mardi Gras grew, and that really the democratization, I call it, of Mardi Gras, really, you had Rex, which gives us Carnival, colors of Carnival. If ever I cease to love them. And when you think of Mardi Gras, it's certainly in the traditional sense, you think of Rex, right? And then in 1968, you had the forming, the first Endymion Parade, and then the forming of the crew of Bacchus with the first super floats and bringing Celebrity Kings. And that was really the growth. That was when Mardi Gras really started growing, because at that point in time, you had 4,000 hotel rooms in New Orleans and about 40% occupancy. And Mardi Gras was, frankly, it was interesting for the locals, but it was not a huge tourist draw because it had been a lot of the same. And what Bacchus wanted to do is build super floats bigger than anyone had ever seen, bring in Celebrity Kings, and bring it to another level. And with that and the advent of Bacchus, it really did up the stage for Carnival around the country. And at the same time, it started growing. And there was just kind of an explosion at that point in time. And so to today, you've got from the 4,000 members, way back, maybe 3,000 or 4,000 members. Now you have as many as 60,000 members of different Carnival clubs and organizations throughout Southeast Louisiana. And in New Orleans, you've got 32 parades just in the city. That doesn't count Jefferson Parish and St. Bernard Parish and Covington, Mandeville, and Houma. All these places, goes even into Baton Rouge, and Lafayette, Lake Charles, the whole state, even, up to Bossier City and, Shreveport have carnivals now. So, everybody is in it, Galveston, Texas. And so into the, obviously Mobile and into the Florida Panhandle. So the carnival has continued to grow, and we're watching it grow very quickly right now. And so in the course of that, there's a story to be told. And so, working with the guys from B1, our two guys, the two Chris's in the New Orleans branch, Chris
Palermo and
Palermo,
King.
yeah. Those guys really took the time to understand what we were doing, not only locally, but also what we were doing around the world.
Nationally and internationally.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's good stuff. There's great stories about your father, Blaine. There's one that at the beginning of his career where he's back from World War II, and your mother, your grandmother, his mother would have been having a surgery, and he needed to make compensation to the hospital. He ended up painting a mural.
Well, it just so happened that the only hospital on the West Bank was the Algiers Clinic, and it was right on Algiers Point. And the guy that owned that clinic was a guy named Henry LaRocca. And Dr. LaRocca also happened to be the captain of the crew of Allah, which was that first little parade that my grandfather built that float for in 1932.
Algiers, Louisiana.
Algiers, Louisiana. Yeah. And so he said to my father, he said, look, he said, Blaine, he said, if you paint the history of medicine on the walls of my clinic, then I will do your mom's operation. So he did an incredible job of that, the history of medicine. And LaRocca goes to him, he's 19 at the time, says, Blaine, he said, man, you really did an incredible job. He said, you think you could build a parade? And my father, of course, at 19, and like I told you, he believed he could do anything. He's like, right. Sure, I could do it. Not realizing that his father had told him, look, if the kid gets in a jam, I'll help him out. But he built the Allah Parade, and within 2 years, all of New Orleans was talking about how the poor people in Algiers, which is basically the other side of the tracks in New Orleans, how the poor folks in Algiers had nicer floats than the old line, the Blue Bloods, with Rex coming down St. Charles Avenue. Everybody in town was talking about how nice the Allah floats were, and frankly, they were really, it was the talk of the town.
Now, is that when Finner reached out to? Yeah.
Darwin Finner at that point in time, about 2 years after my dad had started with the Rex Parade, the Allah Parade, he was called to sit down with Mr. Finner and asked, and my dad goes in. Of course, my father's had 1 year of the New Orleans Academy of Art. He was not, college educated. He was, other than his travels to Asia, at the end of the war, he really, wasn't a very sophisticated guy. And he gets into this room and, he's going to meet Darwin Finner, who was one of the wealthier, captain of Rex, president of Tulane University, board of Tulane, a pillar of New Orleans society. And he gets, here he is, a 21-year-old kid from Algiers, and he goes in the office, and Mr. Finner goes, Blaine, we've been hearing about what you've been doing. We've been seeing what you're doing. But we really, would you be interested in building the Rex Parade? And my father was like, well, yeah, of course. He said, yeah, I'd love to build a parade. So, well, how much would you like to be paid? And my father, who's normally was pretty impetuous in terms of answering things quickly and maybe not thinking, he didn't answer. And Mr. Finner looked at him and said, I'll tell you what, I'm going to pay you $500 a week. Well, $500 a week in 1949, 1950 was all the money in the world.
That's real.
And my father just bought his parents the first house they ever owned for $3,000. So put things in perspective. So $500 a week, and he got called into Mr. Finner's office several months later, and Mr. Finner just he goes in there, and Finner takes a pad and pencil and shoves it across the desk to him, and says, Blaine, he said, did you bring any receipts, for your materials and the stuff you've been buying? And my dad thinks he's in trouble. So Finner pushes the pad and pencil, and my dad goes, no. Pushes the pad and pencil. He says, well, write down everything you think you've spent over the course of the last few months. Well, my dad writes down everything, and it's, probably, $2,000 or $3,000. He goes, you sure that's everything, Blaine? He goes, yeah, absolutely, Captain. He called him Captain. He said, called his secretary and says, write Blaine a check to reimburse him. But Blaine, from now on, you're not going to get reimbursed. Well, he thought the $500 included
materials.
The materials and as well. So he wasn't just getting paid $500, it was $500 plus all of his expenses. So it was really a great deal for him. And really, basically, Rex turned him loose to do, to really build a parade on a level, and he had a budget that he had never seen before.
You told a story the other day that I think maybe follows that, where your dad had maybe been given an offer in California or Hollywood or something.
Yeah, well, a couple of years after that, he's building the Rex Parade, and Dr. LaRocca, who was the captain of Allah, became ill. And he asked my father to be the captain of Allah. And so my father became the youngest captain in Mardi Gras, and he was also one of the longest serving captains, but he was very young. He became the captain of Allah, and he did one of his themes, because he loved the movie King Kong. One of his themes was King Kong, and he did it incredibly. Every parade at that time, had a ball in the municipal auditorium. A lot of parades would have them on the night of the actual parade, but there were many parades that would have them some weeks beforehand. And he did King Kong, and inside of the municipal auditorium, which held several thousand people, and it's a mezzanine, 2 stories tall, and he's built this 3-story tall bamboo wall inside of the auditorium, and with these giant gates. And he's got this, beautiful blonde girl tied to the stake, and he has all the guys in the crew, the 200 members of the crew, dressed up as natives. He's got a young guy, he's got this guy who's the great white hunter with with this gun, and he's got everything all set up. And all of a sudden, you hear this, you hear Kong on the other side of the wall. You hear branches cracking, and he's going through the brush, and you're hearing this rumble and this noise, and stuff is breaking. And all of a sudden, the door, these giant gates that he's built, 3-story tall bamboo gates, are moving. And all of the guys that are the natives run up, and they're trying to hold the doors back. Well, all of a sudden, the doors burst open, and in comes this 3-story tall King Kong with 6 of my father's friends inside of it. And smoke's coming out of the nostrils, and the eyes are lit up, and its head is animated, and the eyes open and close, and it basically walks in, and literally people are running for the exits. I mean, it was such a theatrical thing. And at that time, there was a guy that would visit New Orleans very often. In fact, this guy would end up being the biggest name in the world of entertainment ever to this day. And there may never be a bigger name in entertainment. And certainly Walt Disney. And Walt Disney was here in New Orleans. He loved New Orleans. In fact, if you go to any Disney theme park anywhere on earth, there's only one city in name that is represented in his parks, and that's New Orleans. Walt Disney loved New Orleans, thought New Orleans was one of the most incredible, unique. He loved the music. He loved the food. He loved the people. He loved the architecture, everything, the feel about it. Everything about New Orleans was wonderful. And in fact, he looked for a long time at bringing Disney World, not to Orlando, but actually to the North Shore. He was looking.
Wow.
Well, he offered my dad a job.
So
he invited my father to California. He said, Blaine, he comes to New Orleans, and he asked, he had heard about King Kong. My father recreates it for him at his studio in Algiers. And Disney sees it, and he's like blown away. And at this point, he doesn't have a theme park, but he has a wide world of Disney, and he's going to put it on his television show. That was every week. And he invites my father to California. So my dad goes out to Hollywood and visits with him. He's out there for about a week and a half, 2 weeks, and Disney offers him a job. So my dad immediately comes back to New Orleans, and he goes straight to Finner's office. And he says, Captain, he called him Captain. He said, I don't want you to worry. He said, but I can build the Rex Parade in about 3 months. And, I can do the Owl Parade in a month or so. He said, but the other 7, 8 months a year, I'm going to be in California working for Walt Disney. And Finner, obviously a really smart guy, looks at him and says, well, Blaine, that's wonderful. I think that's really great. Walt Disney, that's fantastic. He said, although, Blaine, he said, you could end up being a little fish in a big pond out there in Hollywood. He said, if you stay in New Orleans and you help Mardi Gras democratize, then you could be the, big fish in a little pond here in New Orleans. And also, Blaine, I was thinking about it. It's really too bad. I mean, I certainly understand why you want to go out there and work with him. He said, but I was thinking this year after Mardi Gras, I wanted you to go to Europe because, all the Merrill Lynch offices in Europe are in association with the banks. And the old banking families of Europe, or the old families, they run all the old carnivals. So I was going to send you to Viareggio to meet the Carista, the greatest float builders in the world. I'm going to send you to Valencia, Spain, where the Fieros, the greatest artists in papier-mâché, are. And you could go work with them. And you're going to go to Nice and to Venice and meet the mask makers. And then I was going to send you to Mainz, Frankfurt, Cologne, and Germany for the Fasching. And so he's telling my dad all these things. And he says, Blaine, I was going to pay for you, out of my own pocket for you to go and study over there and learn and bring these ideas back to New Orleans. He said, but I can certainly understand why you'd want to go to work for Walt Disney. So then my dad has a choice, right? He's going to go to work for Walt Disney, or he can go to Europe on Mr. Finner's dime and basically learn all these things that he wanted to learn. And he obviously picked the choice. His choice was to stay in New Orleans and focus his energies on this. And he did go to Europe. And actually those relationships that he made and built, and as a child, he would take me with him to Europe, take me out of school for a month every year as a little boy. And we would travel all over the world, meeting these different artists. And frankly, those guys are people that throughout my childhood and as I grew up, I worked with these guys, learned techniques. And so a lot of the techniques and the things that he brought back and things that I learned, we really have now become the cutting edge in terms of technology and methods. A lot of the stuff you see, the billboards, the Chick-fil-A cows, and you go on the Las Vegas Strip and you see the giant M&Ms, the Statue of Liberty, you see the giant Harley Davidson, the big, the Luxor, the big Sphinx, all that stuff was built by us. Or if you go to Disney, we were the first company ever allowed to build the Disney characters outside of Disney because of my relationships with these European artists. In 1989, I was asked to go to France, to go to Paris, where they were building Disney, the first big Disneyland park outside the United States.
Right.
And I was asked to go there and meet the guys, where I was asked to basically help them out because they had so much work to get done in such a short period of time. And we did that with them, and it was incredible.
What was fascinating when you were telling part of that story about traveling with your dad when you were young, he said when you came back and being the artist that he was, he would draw the images of the countries on
there was
bedroom
in
wall.
my bedroom there was on the bedroom walls we had a map of the world, and everywhere we visited there would be a circle, and everywhere we stayed there was a red star, and then he would put the indigenous people. He would do little sculptures of the indigenous people from those places. So
I've thought about that several times since you shared that story with us. I was like, that's magical.
Yeah, well, by the time I was 16, I'd been around the world, several times in like 65 or 70 countries. I mean, I remember I was with him on the first 747 to fly out of Tokyo to Los Angeles, and that was a big deal.
Hannis T. Bourgeois provides accounting services, litigation support, as well as tax and assurance services to companies and individuals throughout the region. With offices in Baton Rouge, Denham Springs, New Orleans, and Hammond, their team of professionals have a wide range of specialized expertise and give personalized attention to each client they work with. HTB serves all types of business structures, including corporations, private businesses, startups, individuals, and more. So call them today to learn how they can help you. Reach out to them by phone or learn more at their website, www.htbcpa.com. A little testimonial here. HTB has been my accounting firm for over 30 years and have guided my initial company from startup to expanding to numerous operating companies. HTB has provided guidance in helping us expand across the U.S., doing business in more than 30 states. Flat out, HTB has made all the difference in the world to our business. This podcast is sponsored by NAI Latter & Blum, Louisiana's leading commercial real estate firm, offering expertise in every discipline, including office, industrial, retail, multifamily, and corporate services. Their agents guide you through the real estate process from start to finish, using a host of marketing, prospecting, and analytical technologies. As leading entrepreneurs, your valuable time and resources should align with the most trusted name in commercial real estate, NAI Latter & Blum. Learn how they can work for you at www.latterblum.com. Turnkey Solutions is a nationwide cybersecurity and IT systems expert, providing the services that growing businesses need to stay ahead of hackers, hurricanes, and IT nightmares. With 24/7 support teams and offices across Louisiana and Texas, they bring peace of mind to companies of all sizes. Their 5-star rated team provides lightning-fast IT support with the cybersecurity and business continuity solutions today's businesses demand. When you're looking for a technology partner to provide you with peace of mind, find out more by calling them at 225-224-6594 or chat with them online at www.tks.la/NXT. your dad was known as Mr. Mardi Gras.
Yep.
And when he started in the business, you mentioned there were just a few crews.
There was a handful of crews. I mean, I think maybe, very small amount. I think when my grandfather started, you had, think about it. My grandfather, Alla, was I think it's the fifth oldest crew now. And, so there was only maybe 7 or 8 crews.
Yeah.
When they formed Alla. I mean, there was crews that came in and went out, but there's Comus, Rex. Comus was the oldest, which is no more. Rex, which was the second oldest, which, was the first day parade. And then you had, after Comus, you had Proteus and Momus, which Momus doesn't exist anymore. But so you got Rex and Proteus, and then, you've got probably like Carrollton, and then as Alla. Becomes crew of Alla.
I was reading something that said, as long as you were Caucasian, you had a parade to go to. But if you were a member of the Jewish community or Black community or even Italian, there were not parades for those communities. But your father was instrumental in getting those groups to...
Yeah, I mean, so listen, Carnival, look, there was always organizations. I would say there was always clubs and organizations within Carnival where people would participate, but it was never like it is today. And so when my dad really got into it, look, after World War II, there was a lot of suburban crews and things started coming together. This is in the 50s. But really, the growth in Mardi Gras really happened in the 60s. Right. And that was, to think about it, there was no parade think about this, on the Saturday night in 1968, when Crew of Endymion debuted, there was no parade on Saturday night. Now think about that today.
Yeah.
You can't think of there not being a parade on Saturday night, or frankly, a parade on Sunday night when Bacchus rolled the following year. So there was no parade on Saturday or Sunday night. And so what ended up happening is that, it's kind of an interesting how it really, and this is obviously, there's a million different perspectives on it. I can only give you mine. But so Bacchus comes about in 69. In 1968, Owen Brennan Sr. and Dick Brennan and Owen Brennan Jr., Pip Brennan, who is the oldest son of Owen Brennan Sr., and Dick Brennan, who was Owen Brennan Sr.'s youngest brother. Owen Brennan Sr.'s oldest son and his youngest brother were about the same age. And those two guys came in with a guy named Larry Youngblood into my father's office, and they said, we want to start a crew. And my dad... They said, we want to call it the Merry Men of Sherwood. That's what Larry Youngblood, who was a costumer here locally. And my dad said, wait a minute, guys. He said, Pip, you may not know it, but your dad and Dick, your brother, Owen Sr., had worked with my grandfather, my father's father, Roy Kern. And what they would do is they would actually take the Alla parade, the Alla ball, and they would recreate the Alla ball in the Lions Center, which was a Nord Center on Tchoupitoulas, and I think it was Tchoupitoulas and Washington Avenue, or Louisiana Avenue was where the Lions Center was. They would recreate this Alla ball with all the same costumes and a lot of the Alla members for tourists that would come to New Orleans. And they'd started that in 1949. Well, what ended up happening was that Owen Brennan Sr. died. He died actually before he ever opened Brennan's Restaurant on Royal Street. The first Brennan's Restaurant was across the street from Absinthe House and Arnold's. And before they made the move to Royal Street, he had passed away. And so that crew had gone away. But in 69, 68, and these guys walked to my dad's office, my dad knew, in fact, I have the original charter of Bacchus. And so that's how the name Bacchus came about, was something that my grandfather, and Owen Brennan Sr. had formed this organization in 1949. So in 68, when they got together, in 69, Bacchus was the name. Bacchus was the god of one. And the idea was that these guys had in their mind, people are coming to New Orleans, but they would come for the weekend for Mardi Gras, but then they'd leave on Sunday. And so they wanted to do something on Sunday night that would get people, if they spent Sunday night for a big parade, then they'd probably stay, they'll be there Monday, right? And you might as well stay Monday night to be there for Tuesday for Mardi Gras Day. And so the idea was they were hoteliers and restaurateurs.
Right.
And these guys wanted, those two guys were restaurateurs. They were the French Quarter group, and all the guys they worked with all wanted to basically extend the carnival season. And frankly, that's why Rex was, Rex, one of the first things that Rex did when it was formed, it would put out these bulletins that would announce carnival in, His Majesty Rex invites, basically they put them in train stations all over the Southeast, all over the country, inviting people to come to New Orleans for carnival. And that was with Bacchus, by having a celebrity king. Danny Kaye was the first king, but they had kings like Bob Hope and Kirk Douglas and Jim. I mean, the biggest names in America. They had those guys as a king. They built floats that were twice as big as anybody had ever seen. And anyway, it changed the way people think of carnival.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
And they rolled those first floats into the Rivergate, which was our convention center at the time, which was unbelievable because Bob Hope told my father, he said, I've been all over the world. I've seen everything. It was absolutely, he said, those floats, he said, he was on the King's float, obviously, in Bacchus, pulling into the Rivergate with 3,000 people in evening gowns and black tie, this beautiful setup, a big stage and bands, and you've got the high school bands playing. He said it was electric. He said it was like nothing he had ever experienced. So coming from Bob Hope, who had been around the world, helping with all of our veterans and going and doing all the stuff that he did everywhere. He said it was one of the most amazing things that he'd ever witnessed, and it really changed Carnival. Yeah, that parade at that time.
So you obviously grew up in New Orleans, Tulane grad. What was it like being Blaine Kern's son?
Well, I mean, in New Orleans, it's like anything. We take a lot of things for granted. I think in New Orleans, we even take our carnival. I mean, the world, everyone, I'm traveling all the time because everybody wants to copy what we do for business. I mean, literally, I've got municipalities all over the United States and all over the world that want to emulate and copy what New Orleans does. There's so many reasons why that can't happen.
Right.
And remind me to tell you what I believe is the difference between New Orleans Carnival and Mardi Gras and what everybody else does. But everybody wants to copy what we do here. Being my father's son was very interesting because obviously I told you about all the traveling things we did. Obviously, we went fishing. We would go fishing on the weekends, and my dad's, one of his closest friends was a guy named Clarence Geruso, who was the chief of police. So I couldn't get in trouble as a kid, which was probably not a good thing, But needless to say, there's lots of stories, and anybody listening to this that knows me probably knows some of the stories. But let's just say that I got away with a lot of things you probably shouldn't have. Nothing, earth-shattering, horrible, but things that kids do, stupid things that kids do in high school and in college. But it was an amazing upbringing because I'd ride in all the parades. On the weekends, my dad would pile everybody into a station wagon in our neighborhood, and we'd all go down to the dens, the carnival dens we call them. We go down the dens, and you're playing in these floats, and you hide inside of floats, and you're on a levee because we were in Algiers next to the river. So it was very interesting. I learned a lot. I was a horrible student at Tulane. In fact, I lived with my dad. My father asked me one time, "Son, how is Tulane?" He didn't say, "How are your grades?" He didn't even ask me how my grades, was I studying, what was going on. He said, "How is Tulane?" And I was honest. I said, "Dad, Tulane is awesome." Well, it's because I had been in boarding school and I came back to New Orleans and the bar rooms didn't close, so I was having a great time. And of course, I always thought that I'd be in this business, and so I was always very focused on this business. And in fact, my third year at Tulane, notice I don't say my junior, but my third year at Tulane was the World's Fair was coming to New Orleans in 1984. It was 1983, and my father said to me, he said, "Son," he said, at that time, the World's Fair is what developed the convention center in our warehouse district, got redeveloped because of the World's Fair. the World's Fair was coming to town, and obviously there was a lot of people that felt that if Knoxville, Tennessee could get 6 million visitors for their World's Fair, that New Orleans easily could get 12 million, right? I mean, New Orleans is so much more interesting than Knoxville, Tennessee. Well, the difference between Knoxville and New Orleans, there's a few things. One is if you draw a 500-mile circle around Knoxville, Tennessee, you have tens of millions of people to visit. If you draw a 500-mile circle around New Orleans, you have tens of millions of crawfish and alligators and shrimp, but there's really not a lot of people. And so we didn't get the numbers, but at that time, we were doing, my Mardi Gras World was being formed by my father on the West Bank. They built a gondola, a $13 million gondola, which was the number one ridden attraction at that World's Fair. It was my dad and Augie Perez. That went across the river from our property in Algiers to Julia Street. We had the parade that we were doing for the fair, and then my brother Blaine was working on the Louisiana Journey, which was a dark ride through Hall A of the Convention Center, and then we had the bridge gate, the entrance gate to the fair, as well as the Wonder Wall to build. And so we had so many things to do, didn't have enough people to do it. And my father said to me, he called me in his office, he said, son, I need you to go to Spain, where we had a connection with this guy named Salvador Jimeno, who was an artist that we worked with. He said, you need to go to Spain and build a lot of the stuff that we're going to use for the World's Fair because we just don't have the capacity or the people to get this done. And so he sent me to Spain. I went to Seville, to University of Notre Dame, had a program at the Windsor School, which was basically, it was a Spanish program, intense Spanish program, and I basically studied Spanish for 6 days a week, for 6 weeks, for 6 hours a day. And learned Spanish and ended up going to Valencia, where we built all the stuff for the fair. And that really was a great exposure for me because it really gave me what would later become my passion and the reason why Disney and the casinos in Las Vegas and Chick-fil-A and all the people that we do, DreamWorks, the people we work with today, we basically invented processes to build and to do the work that we do, similar to what was done, many years ago, but we're on the cutting edge. And that's maybe where, if I had paid a little more attention in college, I probably would have patented a lot of these processes because everybody in the entertainment industry today is actually utilizing and copying the processes that I came up with, frankly, to do a lot of the work that we did in Las Vegas. Because in Las Vegas, we had so much work to do in the early 90s because Luxor was coming out of the ground. My dad called me up, and I'm in Paris. I'm working over there for Disney as a contractor, and he goes, son, you need to come to Las Vegas. I said, what for, Dad? He said, son, they're going to build Las Vegas. They're going to build Disneyland with slot machines. So what are you talking about? He said, well, MGM had this program where they wanted to make Las Vegas family friendly. It didn't work out, but I flew to Vegas, and I met a guy named Charles Silverman, who was the architect for Luxor Casino, and we ended up doing all the interior, all the theming for the Luxor Casino. And that was kind of the beginning. It was just an explosion of work because they were doing all this theming and sphinxes, and the MGM got built, and all these different things that happened along the Las Vegas Strip in those early 90s. And we did a lot of that work. At the same time, we were doing work for Disney. Disney was our biggest client at that time. And as they were building all their new hotels and resorts in Orlando, we were doing all the theming for those jobs as well. So I was really focused on that portion of the business. Was the theming and working for these guys. Because, of course, my father, Blaine, was Mr. Mardi Gras. And so, and frankly, he was Mr. Mardi Gras. He's still Mr. Mardi Gras in my mind because he was the guy, who really, in my mind, helped Carnival grow. And he did it because he had an incredible imagination, and he had some really great friendships with some of the captains of these organizations that really wanted Mardi Gras to grow too. And frankly, you almost had like an arms race between the major organizations and Mardi Gras. When Orpheus came to being in the early 90s, that was another change in Mardi Gras because Orpheus did some things that frankly kind of woke the giant up, and we got even more in terms of special effects. But of course, it was things that we had learned, that I'd learned in Las Vegas and working for Disney. We brought all those ideas back here and that skill set to make our floats even better. So the floats that we have here in New Orleans are far better than the floats that you see anywhere else in the world. And frankly, we build them at a much better price than anywhere else in the world too, because we have so many of these floats and so many of these designs that we're doing. So there's nowhere in the world that you're going to see this many floats and this much effort put into Carnival by the people of the city of New Orleans, but also by, there's an industry of companies doing this here.
It's amazing when you consider the number of crews that you build for and the number of floats total. I think I read a number of 450 floats.
Yeah, that was years ago. That was now it's each year 600 to 700.
600 to 700.
Right.
That's local.
Yeah.
But when you look beyond that and you look at your building expansion and the clients that you're working for, there's theme park attractions. And I was in Universal Studios in February. My wife and I took our grandson, and I think it was in February. And they come through with a Mardi Gras parade.
They turn that whole theme park
into
New Orleans.
And where we're standing, we see the first float, second, third, fourth, fifth. I'm thinking, okay, there'd probably be like 6 floats or something like that. It was endless.
Yeah,
I
and it's
think
also
it was
the
30.
biggest. Yeah, it's the big. First of all, that parade at Universal that we do is now. This is probably 27 years. This is the 27th or 28th year that we've done it. They literally turned that entire theme park into New Orleans from February till April every year. Sometimes they go into June, and basically they build a French Quarter. They serve New Orleans food. Yeah. They have bands from New Orleans and Louisiana every day performing. And then on the weekends, they bring in major concerts a la what Endymion and Bacchus and Orpheus do, but really Endymion. They bring in these big concerts with big name talent, and it drives more season pass business, and it has consistently gotten guest satisfaction ratings every year better than the year before. It's the oldest running show in the history of Universal Studios. And, we've been a part of it from the beginning, and it was because of what I did in the theme park business. We were at a trade show in Orlando called IAPA, the International Association of Amusement Parks, where I'll be next week. And at that show, I had props and things that we did on display, but no floats because I really wasn't even thinking in terms of that.
Right.
And the guy who ran entertainment for Universal Studios walks up to my booth and he says, "Hey," he said, "you guys are in the parade business?" Like, "Yeah." He goes, "You guys from New Orleans?" "Yeah." He said, "Well, we may be interested in doing a parade." I said, "Well, that's great. I'd love to hear from you." We traded cards, information, and literally that show always runs the week before Thanksgiving. So literally a day or two before Thanksgiving, or maybe afterwards, I get a phone call from this guy, and he says, "Hey," he said, "Man, we'd love to do Mardi Gras here at Universal." And I was like, "Man, that's awesome." I'm thinking it's going to be
2 years out.
It's going to be it's a year and a few months out. He goes, "No, I want to do it this year." And so it's like literally we're at the end of November, so I've got December and January to put together 60 days to build a parade, and I got to get floats to Orlando. And so literally, we went and got a building. When I said, "Well, I said this year," and he goes, "Look, Barry," I said, "if you don't do it this year," he said, "the higher ups in the marketing in our group, they might decide to do something else." He said, if you want to do this, you got to do it this year. And so we literally built 14 floats, delivered and built 14 floats to Universal Studios in that short period of time within 60 days. And that parade was a huge hit. And as I said, it drives more of what they call the season pass business. It drives more locals, but then it drives an incredible amount. It's one
the amount that Kern Studios has expanded across the globe and in so many different areas, resorts, casinos, retail and advertising, parades, events. It's just amazing. Folks, if you're interested, check out their website for Mardi Gras World.
And Kern Studios, kernstudios.com.
Kern Studios. And it is just amazing how you guys have grown around the world. Just absolutely amazing. It's one, I'm thinking as your father was traveling, as you were traveling with him as a young man, and then traveling and doing business, as you described. But to go and then conduct business overseas, internationally, you did the immersive language. There's so many things. There's currencies, there's workforce, there's so many things running through my mind. Like, there's a lot going on there to conduct business internationally, and you guys are just knocking it out of the park. We would like to thank MBD Automation for their support of the Next Entrepreneur podcast. MBD Automation is a mechanical install contractor with a program-centric focus. So what do these guys do? They install conveyor systems, VRCs, platforms, singulators, sorters, and all sorts of other types of automated equipment. Who do they work for? They work for systems integrators, manufacturers, end users, in fulfillment centers, airports, mail processing facilities, and projects in the defense industry. MBD Automation works for numerous Fortune 500 companies across the United States and has a list of international clients that they perform work for in the U.S. as well. If MBD Automation can help you on your next project, you can find them online at mbdautomation.com. This podcast is sponsored by Mayhall, Fondren Blaze, a Louisiana business litigation firm offering sophisticated legal advice that is tailored to meet the needs of their individual clients, including a wide variety of litigation, complex business negotiations, corporate formations, closings, and title examination. As leading entrepreneurs, your valuable time and resources should align with the expertise of MFB, a Louisiana practice made for business. Learn how we can work with you at www.mfbfirm.com. Could you or your business benefit from a comprehensive financial plan? Our sponsor, Centura Advisors, is a locally owned firm in Baton Rouge, Louisiana that specializes in personal and business financial planning, tax planning, corporate retirement plans, and investment management. We provide an all-in-one wealth management service so busy business owners like you can take back your valuable time. Visit www.centura-advisors.com to learn more. Centura Advisors, it's time to plan your future. I love business, and I love considering, how much is involved in a business beyond what we may see. We toured through your warehouse here of all the floats and all the stuff we looked at. It's just absolutely beautiful. But there's so much more that goes on. You start to think about, transporting floats to Orlando or wherever. You do route management, storage, insurance, police escort. There's, and you look at Mardi Gras and you see these big tractors and got generators on them, and LED lights and fiber optics, and there's so much going on there. I'm so curious how you pull all that off, what it looks like as you're building up to Mardi Gras. Give me an idea of what your staffing is average year round, and then when it looks like in spikes, maybe around Mardi Gras.
So it's surprisingly, I think that what it takes in our organization here, we probably, you probably have a little bit over 100 people that are working year round to do this.
Right.
And then you've got, and then if you add Mardi Gras World, which is the, the events, the things we do, there's probably another 30 people. But there's a lot of people. Every day we have events where we bring in contract labor. Every night there's events happening here because we're next to the convention center, and every major citywide convention that came to New Orleans, pre-COVID, would do an event here at Mardi Gras World. And
it's just a party.
Yeah, just a party. We
for
do
people
events.
To come and
Basically,
see.
during the day, you come here. We're open for tours during the day,
Right.
And then at nighttime, all of these conventions, they want to do something Mardi Gras, right? They're in New Orleans.
Right.
What's more New Orleans than Mardi Gras?
And you're right next door.
We're right next door to the convention center. In fact, the convention center is halls A through J, and they call this Hall K.
Your
Our place is Hall K for Kern, obviously, but they joke because so many events in the convention center. Once listen, we work with the Convention and Visitors Bureau and with Louisiana State Tourism, the Lieutenant Governor, and the mayor. We work with everybody. Listen, New Orleans does not have the pocketbook that a lot of these cities that we now compete with for these big conventions. But what we do have and what we do compete in, that we do a great job in, is entertaining people, feeding people, entertainment, music, and obviously Mardi Gras and Carnival. And so what we'll do is we'll throw parades for them. We'll pick up people on, instead of sending buses to their hotels, we send floats. And I just had 200 of the top executives from the top newspapers around the United States were here in town with Judy Terzakis, who runs the Advocate and Times-Picayune, NOLA.com. Judy had her peers from all over the United States were here. They were all at the Roosevelt Hotel. We picked them up on a triple section float. We brought them here. They landed. They get off. They get cocktails. They've taken pictures inside the float warehouse, and then we bring them into what we call the Grand Oaks Mansion, which is a big antebellum mansion that we have in the back. And literally, these people have a ball. And frankly, we've had groups like PCMA, which is all the meeting planners from around the world that get together every year. We've had them. We've done events. In fact, the one event that I remember, and actually it was the grand opening of Mardi Gras World. One of the first events we did was the media event for the Super Bowl that was in the last Super Bowl that was in New Orleans. And I had been picked by the Saints to be the co-host of hospitality for that event. And they sent me out to Indianapolis, which was the year before. And I went to the Indianapolis party where all the media was, and there's like 7,000 or 8,000 people from the media in town for this thing. And I went in there and I'm like, man, I can't believe they're treating this media. I mean, these guys are waiting in line to get a beer or a drink. The food was terrible. And I'm thinking to myself, man, if I could ever get those guys in New Orleans. And of course, thinking that, and so as the co-host, I said, well, let's let everybody look where they want to go in town. Well, they obviously ended up at Mardi Gras World. I said, look, I'm not going to charge for this, but what I am going to do is any hard costs you guys are going to pay for, we'll pay for. But what we're going to do is we have to do it the way I want to do it. And what we did is we basically built super bars that had 8 bartenders and barbacks in these 4-sided bars that we had down the center. And then we went to every major restaurant in New Orleans, all of our buddies and my friends. And I said, give me a taste. Just give me a taste of your number one best signature dish that you do. Just give me enough as a taste. And so we had over 31 restaurants gave us a taste. And we literally, these guys got in here, 7,000 or 8,000 media people came in, and they literally were blown away. First of all, they never had been treated that way. In fact, the joke was they had nothing to, the only complaint they had was they had nothing to complain about. They had drinks, cocktails, beer, a taste of New Orleans, and they experienced Mardi Gras. And this picture behind you is the owners' party, which I did the following night, which is 600 of the owners of the NFL, all the owners and their guests, which was a special event. But New Orleans, this is what we do, right? We put on events, and one of the things I'll remind myself is that the thing that makes Mardi Gras different than the rest of the world's parades is there's several things. One is, number one, it's non-commercial. It's against the law to have the name of a company on the side of a float. Yeah. So that's a law in Orleans Parish. So you're not allowed, there's no commercialization, which means that these generations of families, when I walk in the Bacchus Den or the Endymion Den, and on an open house day when they go to visit their floats, or the day of the parade, I see generations of families riding floats. Father, son, grandson. You might see 3 or 4 generations. Right. Same, just like in my business. You see these guys, they're part of this because it's a cultural, it's tradition, it's what we do here. And that's what makes it special. That's one thing. The other thing is that it's the interaction. If you go to Macy's or even the Rose Bowl parade, those people are sitting there, and you see people in a chair sitting down and they're clapping, watching the parade. Nobody sits down at a Mardi Gras parade. You become part of the parade. You because of the music and the food, and people are drinking, and they're dancing, they're having a good time. Everybody's enjoying the guy who's literally is the president of the bank is there with the custodian of the bank. The families are interacting, talking to each other. It's the reason why New Orleans is what it is because we interact and we are part of the parade. And that's what makes Mardi Gras so special. And that's the difference in what we do. And that's just the way that we are here.
Yeah, and I think that ties in with my next question about you can't talk to an iconic New Orleans institution like yours and not ask about how you guys got through Katrina. And in doing my research, I realized that Mardi Gras World, Kern Studios, while they didn't get flooded, they took some storm damage, but you guys really were able to help use your facilities to help support the teams that came in to help.
Yeah, it was, well, obviously Katrina was, incredible devastation. And that really, because of so many things, first of all, most people in New Orleans were not thinking about Mardi Gras, except for me and my dad. Right. And we're not even thinking about Carnival after Katrina. I mean, it was devastation. We had some millions of dollars of tornado damage, but nothing that was irreparable, nothing that we couldn't get back in. In fact, we still had electricity in Algiers. We got back electricity and phone way before a lot of other places because, Algiers is high. We had all the generators with all of our tractors to power up stuff. In fact, we sent generators and tractors to different police stations and fire stations to kind of help keep things going. But also, CNN was in town. I'll never forget, they were interviewing my father right after Katrina. And, they said, well, is there going to be a Mardi Gras? And my father said, absolutely, positively. I mean, this was, within weeks after Katrina. And a lot of people said, well, how the hell can you think of having Mardi Gras with all this devastation, everything that's happened? And the reason why is because we knew, first of all, because historically, if a crew goes out of business or doesn't parade from one year to the next, they lose a lot of what they have. Yeah. And the chances of them ever coming back is pretty slim for whatever reason. So we had that against us. Because we were concerned about that. But also we knew that the city of New Orleans needed a pick-me-up and something to give some hope for. Katrina was literally almost 6 months to the day to what Mardi Gras Day was. So it was basically, we had 5 months. What happened was were building things at that point. We got all of our people back to work. In fact, I ended up in Tampa and in Orlando. I went to Universal Studios where we had that great relationship, and the guys at Universal said, Barry, what can we do to help you? I said, well, pay me in advance for next year's parade because I need the money because none of my customers are going to be paying me. Wow. Pay me in advance. And obviously, you can imagine no bank wants to think about, if you're in the Mardi Gras business and New Orleans has been destroyed, nobody's really going to want to. In fact, I had customers in certain places that frankly didn't want to pay us because they didn't know if we'd be around to deliver. And anyway, basically what happened was Universal fronted us money, which allowed us, and we just started building floats and working as if we were being paid. And frankly, Bacchus would call and say, hey, what's Endymion doing? Or Zulu would say, what's Rex doing? I said, man, Rex is rolling. And actually Rex had made a decision. We're moving forward. And I would tell everybody that the other one was moving and we're building stuff. And then, thank God, in December, by the time everybody had come back to New Orleans, we started getting payments. And we had people that paid us. Some of them paid us even the following year. But it all came together as Zulu, which was the most devastated out of all the organizations and had more members die than any other organization because a lot of them were from the East. Zulu was in a conundrum. They didn't know, and a lot of their members didn't feel that it would be appropriate if they would have a parade with all the suffering that they had within their organization. And so we got together, and my dad and myself, and really my dad, we spent a lot of time explaining to them, guys, think about this. You can't have Zulu not be part of Carnival. And imagine the picture it would have painted to the rest of the country.
Oh, yeah.
If, frankly, Rex had rolled and Zulu did not. It's just the haves and the have-nots. And basically we told Zulu, look, Zulu, which we all know, is as much Mardi Gras as anybody. I mean, it's the main event right there with Rex on Mardi Gras Day. We need you guys to do this. And so what we did was we went to some of the other crews and we raised money so that Zulu would be able to spend the money that they had doing things for their members, and at the same time to roll a parade. And we were able to roll everything that year. All the parades rolled. Everything was extremely successful. And it really was a special, magical time for New Orleans, that first carnival after Katrina. And I think we basically showed the world that we're open for business. And then we had an incredible jazz fest after that, and things got rolling again, and we were great.
Barry, that story takes my breath away, man. That is the greatest thing. When you look at your family legacy, I met the fourth generation, your son, Vince.
Yep, and Patrick are both here.
And Patrick, and a couple of weeks ago. And I know they're young, but when you look back at your grandfather, your father, yourself, tell me what you think the defining thing is about each generation, and then tell me what you think that would be for Generation 4.
Well, I think that really if you look at my grandfather, he was an artist. And, he frankly was probably the least bought into Mardi Gras. Basically for him, it was a way, because he really believed, and frankly, even my dad even believed, but really my grandfather thought that, he wanted to be an artist that was painting paintings on a wall.
Right.
And he really thought that he was bastardizing, his art was basically, prostituting himself to create this gaudy, crazy carnival floats, but it was a way to make a living, right? Just like signing, just like doing the
barges.
The barges and the sign writing stuff he did. But he was a good artist. He was a good craftsman. And
so
he
the
and
roots of creativity.
Yeah, and so there was creativity there. But he was the smartest Kern, and I can't believe I left that out. He basically said he was definitely the smartest Kern, because he figured since the world was 75% water and 25% land, he would fish and drink beer 75% of the time, and he worked the other 25%. So he was the smartest Kern. Let's put that on record. And he thought my dad was an empire builder, right? My dad was a very driven guy. My father, because his father couldn't pay the rent in the late 30s. My dad was 8 or 9, and moved in with 3 ladies that were school teachers in probably 1939, 1940, during the Depression. And these ladies had an incredible library in their home. And so my dad was reading H.G. Wells, Jules Verne, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. He was going to the moon, before Sputnik in his mind. And so he had an incredible imagination. He was also raised with his 3 sisters, these 3 ladies, and his Sicilian mother. And they basically treated him like he was baby Jesus. He could do no wrong. In fact, my grandmother would tell him, Blaney, you're not bragging if you're telling the truth. Right. And so he was always, and in fact, his nickname in school was Big Britches Braggadocious, or Braggadocious Big Britches, or something like that. I mean, like, he apparently, he was never in a lack of confidence, and he believed he could do anything. I mean, here's a guy who built the gondola across the river, brought an aircraft, the things that he did, but he also believed he could do anything. So he really brought it to where, in terms of, he was not a businessman, but he was an incredibly creative person, and he did have a vision. And frankly, which he would point out to me, Albert Einstein said that imagination is more important than smarts or brain power. It is. I think having an imagination and being able to believe that to do things and to come up with things. I think you see guys like, frankly, people that are obviously geniuses like Elon Musk that can think outside of the box.
Yeah.
Blaine had that ability, and he instilled that in me, that you could do anything that you wanted. In fact, I believe to this day, anything that I put my mind on in our business, anything that I wanted to do or wanted to make happen, that we could do it, and we've done it. And frankly, he gave me an incredible ability to, and a confidence that to go out into the world and to do things to bring us to the next level in the business with the theme parks and with these museums and a lot of the advertising and things that we do. And then I look at my sons, which, have incredible educations, hard workers. I'm lucky. My son Fitz, who's now been here 8 years, and he really, I think, in my dad before he died, I remember him telling my son, telling Fitz, son, it'll be amazing, what you can bring this business to. And I believe that there's still a lot more things to this business, incredible. We got an incredible future in front of us in terms of what we can do, not only as a business and not only as a family, but frankly, in what we can do for New Orleans and for Louisiana, and frankly, do in a lot of other places. I think we can bring a lot of fun and joy to people, and I think we can create an environment where people will come together. And I think that's the one thing that probably the most important thing that Mardi Gras and what we do is about. We bring people together. Yeah. And, my dad always said, in fact, he would go back he bought Russian tractors at the height of the Cold War. And people were calling them communists. And he said, son, this is when Jimmy Carter was president and we had interest rates of like 18%. And John Deere wanted us like 18%, and the cost of the tractor was like expensive. Right. And we bought these Russian tractors because the Russians gave us 0% interest for 5 years. And my dad said, son, nobody's going to care what's pulling these floats. All they care is if the floats are gone. And he was right about that. Yeah. But he also said, son, we need to work with everybody and talk and trade and do things with people and have a conversation. And I think that's really why he did in Carnival in terms of what he did in terms of democratizing it, because he grew up very poor in Algiers in what he called the salt and pepper neighborhood, black and white, poor people. He never met a stranger. He was always willing, and he always taught us that everyone is equal. Everyone is equal, and how important that is. That you treat everybody as a human being.
Man, it's exhilarating to listen to you talk about your family in that way.
Yep.
When you were describing your dad, you talked about the gondola. You started to say aircraft carrier.
Oh yeah, he bought an aircraft carrier. That's a whole. We have to do a whole nother podcast on that.
Chris Palermo said, "Whatever you do, ask him about the aircraft carrier."
He found out that this aircraft carrier, which was the last in 1939, the U.S. Navy started building 9 CVL cruisers, which were 600-foot long ships. They were cruisers. Basically, kind of, that would go along with battleships.
Right.
That would be used in the war before the war happened. Well, when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor in 1941, they took these 9 ships. There was 9 of them, not 6 of them. They took these 9 CVL carriers. They cut the tops off of them, and they turned them into aircraft carriers. And they were used throughout World War II. Ernie Powell, the famous war correspondent, wrote, he was on this one ship called the USS Cabot, which became, and we, through NATO, right after Vietnam, we gave them to all of our NATO allies in Europe. So the Greeks got one, the Italians got one, the French got 1 or 2, the Spaniards got 1, and they were flying Harriers, jump jets off of them. And my dad found out that the last of these ships was going to be, I don't know how the hell he found out, but he found out it was going to be scrapped, and it was going to Japan for the high-grade steel in the hull of it. It was going to be, for razor blades or something in Japan. And he's like, this cannot happen. I can't see this happen. We're going to save this ship. Well, so at the time, I'm living in Spain when this is going on. I'd been living in Spain. I told you right. This is like 86. I had been living in Spain. My brother had been living in Spain. Long story short, my father sends me to Spain, and we meet this admiral who runs NATO for all of Europe, a U.S. admiral who lives in Madrid, and this ship was stationed in Rota, Spain. Rota is where the Nina Pinta and the Santa Maria sailed from, but it's also the largest U.S. naval base outside of the United States in Europe. And long story short, I meet this guy with my father, and my dad look, we want to save this ship. We don't want you to scrap it. We want to take it to New Orleans, and we're going to turn it into a museum. So anyway, my dad gets interested in it, and they decide they're not going to do it, and it comes to also gets the attention of all these retired admirals in Camden, New Jersey, and up in the Philadelphia area. Well, New Orleans, you have maybe one or two retired admirals. Up there in that part of the world, there's a bunch of them, right? Yeah. Well, all of a sudden now we're competing against these admirals from up in that area and their foundation, and my dad here, and me and my dad and my brother, and so my dad sends me to Valencia. Well, I'm in Valencia, Spain, and he says, son, he said, I want you to take, he's talking to the admiral, and my dad was a very convincing guy. He could sell, you talk to any of his customers, he could sell any idea to anybody for anything. And he basically calls up the admiral and says, look, man, my son is in Valencia, and in Valencia they have the Fallas, which is this big celebration, and the guy that was the maestro mayor, the head teacher of all these falleros, of the artists there, worked with us. Salvador Jimeno is who I was in business with at the time. We're working together. He says, go visit my son in Valencia, and you guys, go out and have a good time. He said, but my son will show you around. You'll have a great time. Just go. So, man, this guy literally, who had normally, when he was in Madrid, he'd be with a Jeep with guys with machine guns protecting him wherever he went. Well, he sneaks off. He gets a car, and he sneaks off with his wife to Valencia from Madrid, around a 3-hour drive. He gets there. He meets me at the Hotel Astoria, which was a hotel that I've been going to from the time I was 7 years old with my dad, right on the main square. And they do daytime firework displays, which are percussion, really just incredible. And then they build these giant statues, look like floats, but they're 6 stories tall, and they burn them on the eve of St. Joseph's Day. And the floats don't move, but there's all these clubs that sponsor these floats. They call them casals. And in every casal, they would be serving agua de Valencia. Agua de Valencia it's basically they would take a champagne flute, put sugar on it, right? And agua de Valencia was champagne, Cointreau, gin, mixed together. And that's agua de Valencia. Well, we go to every casal, and it's the night of the big thing. And we're going to every casal, and me, the admiral, and his wife are drinking. Literally, we're having a ball. And all I know is that night I kind of recalled, and look, I'm a 20-something, like this is 1986, so I'm a 24-year-old kid, right? I'm with this guy who's an admiral who runs NATO, for like the whole of NATO. I'm this kid. And so we go out, man, we have a ball, and we got Salvador with us, and everybody's treated us because Salvador's the maestro mayor. Everybody knew the American kid because I was there working with all the different artists. They all knew me. They liked me. And so we're having a ball, and we're going around, and everybody's treating us, and we're drinking. We get back to the hotel, we're drinking some more, to the point at which, everything's shut down. So I'm like, let's go up to my room. So we get up to my room, and we're drinking more, and we made so much noise at the hotel, had to come tell us to, you guys got to pipe down. So finally, the admiral and his wife go to bed. I go to sleep. And the next morning I wake up, and I got a little bit of a hangover, and I walk downstairs, and it's around 9:30 or 10 in the morning. And I see the admiral's wife in the little area where we'd have breakfast. And I said, hey, how's the admiral this morning? She says, Barry, I've been married to the admiral for 26 years. I've never seen him wake up past 6 o'clock in the morning. It's like 10 o'clock in the morning. Well, let me just tell you, I think the admiral literally, I'm not sure if he just, thought that we'd be the best guys to do this ship, but he literally gave us that ship. I'm not sure if he just thought that he just didn't want me telling the story of what had happened that night, but all I know is that, so then the best part of the story is that 2 months later, we've now made this deal. And so the Spaniards have the ship. The ship has got to go to the U.S. government because it was their ship they had given to them, and it's got to be decommissioned. So my brother and I were supposed to meet my dad in Madrid. My father, who has somehow gotten stuck in Rome with, I'm sure, one of his latest girlfriends, because my dad had lots of girlfriends and wives in my lifetime. He gets stuck, and I'm 24, 25. My brother is 21. And here we are in a rental car showing up to Rota, Spain. My dad has missed a flight, and we're going to take delivery. We're going to sign. So we've got the head of the Department of the Defense for Spain, the head of the Department, the head of the Navy for Spain. We've got the admirals, and we got 1,000 Spanish marineros, which are the Spanish Marines, the Navy guys, and they're all in their dress white saluting us, and they're looking at us like, we're giving this ship to these two kids? I mean, I know what's going through their minds. They're like, what the hell is going on, right? So literally, we here we are. We're taking delivery of the ship. And wait, I can't tell you, the other guy that was there was Christopher Columbus, the 14th. Now you laugh at me. Oh, no, sir. So no, seriously. In fact, you can do the check on this. In 1992, for the 500th anniversary of the Rose Bowl, or 500th anniversary of Columbus discovering America, Christopher Columbus, the 14th direct descendant of Columbus, Cristobal Colon, was the parade marshal and the grand marshal of the Rose Bowl parade that year. And this guy was the 14th direct descendant of Columbus. In fact, he had a gold medallion that he wore that was given to his great-grandfather, to Christopher Columbus, and it's a medallion from Queen Isabel that says Almirante de los Océanos, Admiral of the Ocean Seas. And he was literally, in anything that happens in Spain to this day, because he's the Admiral of the Ocean Seas, he's higher than even the highest Navy Admiral. For anything honorary or anything they're signing off on, he's there to sign off. And so his son, who's going to also be the 15th Admiral of the Ocean Seas. So long story short, he was there too. And so everybody's there, and you can imagine, I mean, here are these two young kids, and we get the ship. And my brother went back with a skeleton crew of 387 Spanish sailors to sail it back to New Orleans. It took him 3 weeks. You imagine this thing was built in 1939, so it was still steam stuff. It had never been in hot water like you get in them. They stopped in the Canary Islands, and in the Canary Islands, it's a wet Navy, so they drink. And the admirals, there was a big boondoggle, and they're getting there, and there's prostitutes and there's drinking, and they stop in San Juan, Puerto Rico. And my brother said it's like Gunga Den. It's like something like, Barry, you wouldn't believe the shit these guys are doing. And like he gets there, he gets back to New Orleans, and we get the ship to New Orleans, and of course on the way it's coming. And it's my dad, and Harry Lee's giving my dad money to help us get. And like they've called up, they need $150,000 for fuel. Oh son, we got to wire money for fuel. Oh, we need ballast as $50,000 for water. You need like 300,000 gallons of water as ballast in a ship. It's like and all this, and then they're like calling up from the dad. It's department, and I'm the only one that calls. I'm the only one that speaks Spanish. Dad, it's somebody in the Department of the Navy in Spain. They want to know how you get the 387 sailors back to Madrid. Oh, son. You better handle that. So I'm like 24 years old. I'm chartering a TWA 747 at 25 years old to fly these guys back to Madrid. So yeah, I've had some interesting, and like there was no thought of what any of this stuff could do. And in the meantime, my father's decided, because this thing has a hangar deck down below where they keep the aircraft, is as big as 2 football fields. And they've just passed Riverboat Gaming. So my dad's like, shit, we're going to have the biggest casino in the first casino in New Orleans, right? We're going to have the biggest casino. And of course, Edwin Edwards becomes governor, and he makes the law where it has to be a new build at a Louisiana shipbuilder. And of course, anyway, it's lots of different stories. And my life was full of stories like that. I got some great ones.
I'm sure there's a book.
It's been very interesting.
Yeah.
And it really, Mardi Gras New Orleans is a special thing. It's an honor for me to be the guy who's leading the family now, and really for my son Fitz to be, frankly, sort of the flag bearers for Carnival. Blaine loved Mardi Gras more than anything, and he loved the city and believed in New Orleans and believed in this state. He believes that we're one of the most unique places in the world, and we are. If you think about it, anywhere you go in the world and you say New Orleans, they know this city.
Oh, yeah.
And they smile, and they'll say Mardi Gras, they'll say jazz, they'll think of the food. New Orleans punches way above its weight. It's one of those cities, and I think that Mardi Gras has been a big part of that.
Yeah.
And obviously, all the things, and listen, it's really an honor to be able to, frankly, carry this legacy on. This is a legacy business that really, there's not many like it.
That is for sure. Barry, it has been a complete joy to listen to your stories and to have followed up and just meeting you a couple of weeks ago to this interview. So thank you, sir. Greatly appreciate it. Man, oh man, those stories are the best. I just love the time meeting with Barry at his Mardi Gras World. I asked him, Barry, have you written a book yet? And honestly, that book would be 5,000 pages long to capture their stories and would be better suited for a Netflix series. So that someone needs to do that. But I loved how they've grown their business, not only in the state of Louisiana, across the country, but internationally. Fascinating stories. Incredible legacy that they've created. And we really are appreciative of the time that he took to share those stories with us. So we appreciate you guys watching, and we'll catch you next time. We would like to thank our title sponsor, B1 Bank. They can be found online at b1bank.com. The Next Entrepreneur is produced by Propel Productions. You can find more information at propelyourstory.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the Next Entrepreneur podcast and hit the bell for notifications. You can also follow us on social media. The links are in the description below.